You come home after 8 hours at work. You open the door and look around. No chewed cushions. No scratch marks on the doorframe. No shredded mail on the floor. No angry note from your neighbor about barking. The house is completely intact, and your dog is lying on the rug, head slightly lifted, tail doing one slow wag, looking at you with an expression that says absolutely nothing happened. You feel relieved. You feel grateful. You maybe even feel a little proud because you have the calm dog, the independent dog, the dog that handles being alone without making your life difficult. And you have probably told someone about it. My dog is so good when I leave. They just sleep all day. They are totally fine. I need to tell you something about that dog, that quiet, still, perfectly behaved dog that greets you calmly after 8 hours alone. That dog may be the one you need to worry about the most, because behavioral researchers who have left hidden cameras running inside homes have documented what actually happens in those 8 hours. And what they found in the silent homes is in some ways more disturbing than what they found in the loud ones. We all know what the loud version of separation anxiety looks like. The frantic barking that your neighbor texts you about. The doorframe that has been scratched through to bare wood. The couch cushion that exploded. The research has documented that timeline in precise detail. Frantic vocalization begins on average just 3 minutes and 15 seconds after the owner walks out. Destructive behavior begins within 7 minutes. That is the version of distress that gets noticed. That is the version that gets treated. But what about the dog that goes completely silent? What about the dog that does not bark, does not destroy, does not do anything that would show up on a neighbor complaint or a repair bill? What about the dog that just lies down and freezes? From the outside, we interpret that silence as peace. We assume the dog settled. We assume they found their comfortable spot and drifted off to sleep and had a perfectly fine day. We reward them for it. Good dog, so independent, so calm. But veterinary behaviorists who have analyzed the silent camera footage have found something that stops them cold. The dog is not moving, but their physiological system is in overdrive. Their heart rate is elevated. Their breathing is shallow. Their body is rigid in a way that is not rest. They are not sleeping. They are frozen. And the psychological explanation for that freeze response is one of the most important and heartbreaking discoveries in the history of animal cognition. In the 1960s, a psychologist named Martin Seligman at the University of Pennsylvania ran a series of experiments that produced a finding that changed psychology permanently. He found that when animals were exposed to prolonged stress that they could not escape and could not control, they eventually stopped trying to escape at all, even when an escape became available, even when the path out was right in front of them. They had stopped believing that their behavior had any effect on their situation. They lay down and stayed still. He called this phenomenon learned helplessness. And for decades, the interpretation of that finding was that passivity was something the animal had learned through repeated failure. They tried, they failed, they tried again, they failed again, and eventually they learned to stop trying. That was the story for 50 years. And then in 2016, Seligman published a major revision to his own theory. And the revision changed everything. He had it backwards. Passivity is not something animals learn. Passivity is the brain's biological default state when it is trapped in prolonged, inescapable stress. The animal does not have to learn to give up. Giving up is what the nervous system does automatically when it has been running in a state of uncontrollable threat for long enough. The active resistance, the barking, the scratching, the desperate attempts to find an exit, that is what has to be learned. That is the effortful state. The freeze is what is underneath it. And a dog that has stopped barking after an hour has not calmed down. A dog that greets you quietly after 8 hours has not found peace with the situation. That dog has stopped believing that its behavior matters. It has entered a state of quiet panic with nowhere to go. Now I want to show you what that state does to a dog's body over time, because this is where the silence becomes medically significant. In 2019, Researchers analyzed long-term cortisol levels extracted from dog hair samples. Hair cortisol gives you a picture of the stress hormone load an animal has been carrying over weeks and months, not just in a single moment. And the finding from that study was counterintuitive, in a way that should make every owner of a quiet dog stop and pay attention. In severely anxious dogs, the long-term cortisol levels were sometimes lower than in calmer, less anxious dogs. Not because the quiet dogs were more relaxed, but because their stress system had been running so hard and so continuously for so long that it had started to burn out. The technical term is HPA axis dysregulation. The hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, the system that produces and regulates cortisol, can become chronically suppressed when it has been pushed past its limits for an extended period. The cortisol tanks, not because the stress is gone, but because the system producing it is exhausted. A depleted cortisol reading in a chronically stressed dog does not mean the dog is fine. It means the dog's stress response system is running on empty. And a body running on a burned-out stress response is a body that is developing health consequences you cannot see from the outside. Immune dysfunction, digestive problems, chronic inflammation, behavioral changes that accumulate so slowly you mistake them for the dog just getting older. The quiet dog is not the easy dog. The quiet dog is the dog whose suffering has become invisible. Now I want to ask you a question that I need you to take seriously. Where did your dog's baseline anxiety level come from in the first place? Because here is what the research shows, and it is uncomfortable. In 2019, researchers at Linkoping University in Sweden measured the long-term hair cortisol of 58 dog and owner pairs over a period of months. They were looking for a relationship between owner stress and dog stress, and they found one. A direct, statistically significant, longitudinal relationship. The owner's stress level predicted the dog's stress level, not the other way around. The dog's cortisol followed the owner's cortisol over months. When the owner's stress went up, the dog's stress went up. When the owner found a period of lower stress, the dog's numbers reflected that too. Your dog does not begin their day at a neutral emotional baseline. They begin their day at whatever emotional baseline you are carrying. If you are burned out at work, if you are going through a difficult period, if your own nervous system is running hot, your dog is biologically absorbing that before you even pick up your keys to leave. They are not catching your stress from one stressful morning. They are tracking your stress over months, and their body is responding to it as if it is their own. This is not a reason to feel guilty. This is a reason to understand that your dog's well-being and your own are not separate systems. They are entangled in a way that the science is only beginning to fully map. Now, let me get to what you can actually do about this. Because I know some of you have already spent money trying to fix a quiet, anxious dog. The plug-in pheromone diffusers, the calming supplements, the anxiety wraps, the specialized beds. Let me save you the continued expense. Rigorous placebo-controlled studies on the pheromone diffusers, the most widely marketed of these products, have found no significant effect on dog heart rates or measurable anxiety markers. The dogs in the placebo groups did just as well as the dogs in the treatment groups. The only intervention with consistent clinical evidence behind it is graduated exposure. But the way most people attempt graduated exposure is wrong, and doing it wrong does not produce slow progress. Doing it wrong produces no progress, and sometimes makes the situation worse. Here is what wrong looks like. You have been home all weekend. Monday morning arrives. You leave for work, and you plan to come home at lunch to check on them. 5 hours is not graduated exposure. 5 hours for a dog in acute separation distress is not a starting point. 5 hours is a crisis. The correct starting point is seconds, not minutes. Seconds. You walk to your front door. You touch the handle. You turn around and walk back to wherever you were. That is one repetition. You wait a few minutes. You do it again. You open the door an inch. You close it. You come back. You step outside. You close the door fully. You count to 10. You come back in. To you, standing at your own front door and coming back inside after 10 seconds feels pointless. It feels like you are accomplishing nothing. But here is what is happening inside your dog's nervous system during those 10 seconds. Their prediction system is receiving new data. The door opened. The door closed. The human came back. The door opened. The door closed. The human came back. You are not building their tolerance for absence. You are building their evidence base for return. And those are fundamentally different things. Tolerance for absence is passive endurance, grinding through the time until you come back. Evidence for return is an active neurological update. The door means something different now. The door used to mean loss. You are teaching it to mean a temporary interruption before reunion. Every repetition is a data point, and data points accumulate. Now, let me walk you through the full protocol week by week, because the sequence matters. Week 1 is about building the concept. You are not extending duration yet. You are simply establishing that you leave and you return. Every departure ends in return, every single one. You are flooding your dog's memory with a single consistent message. The message is, departure is not permanent. You do this in the home first. Walk to the door. Come back. Step outside. Come back. Close the door fully. Count to 15. Come back. Repeat until your dog's body language tells you they have stopped anticipating crisis every time you move toward the door. Soft muscles. Easy breathing. No immediate escalation. That is your signal that week 1 is working. Week 2 is about extending those windows in the smallest increments you can measure. Not doubling the time because that felt easy. Not jumping to 5 minutes because you are impatient. You add 30 seconds. You add a minute. You watch your dog's body language after you return. Are they calm? Then you can extend slightly. Are they showing physiological signs of having spiked during the absence? Panting, excessive greeting, inability to settle quickly after you return. Then you went too far too fast. You come back down. You rebuild from a shorter window that produced a calm return. This is not failure. This is precision. Week 3 and beyond is where the protocol starts to compound. Because here is the finding that veterinary behaviorists who run this protocol consistently report. There is a tipping point, and it is at approximately 40 minutes. Once your dog can tolerate a 40-minute absence without their nervous system spiking, the jump to longer durations tends to follow relatively quickly. Not because the tolerance is built linearly minute by minute, but because 40 minutes represents the threshold at which your dog has accumulated enough neurological evidence to fundamentally rewrite what departure means to them. Below 40 minutes, they are still holding the old story. You might not come back. At 40 minutes and beyond, the new story has taken over. You always come back. And once a nervous system has genuinely updated to that story, the specific duration of the absence becomes far less relevant. Because the fundamental terror, the possibility of permanent loss, is gone. Let me also address what you do when you come home, because the return matters as much as the departure. If you come home and your dog is in a heightened state and you respond with visible frustration, any damage you see, even a chewed corner of a rug, even scratch marks on a door, will be associated with your arrival rather than with the behavior that caused the damage. The dog cannot connect your frustration to something that happened 4 hours ago. There is no cognitive chain available to them across that time window. What they connect your frustration to is you coming through the door, and gradually, you coming through the door becomes something to brace for rather than something to celebrate. Which means a dog that was already anxious about your departure becomes additionally anxious about your return. The entire day becomes a loop of anticipatory stress with no relief point. Come home neutrally. Kneel down. Use their name. Make physical contact. Let the oxytocin do its work. You are not rewarding anxious behavior by greeting your dog warmly. You are closing the neurochemical loop that their nervous system has been waiting all day to close. Let me bring this all the way back to where we started. The quiet dog in the intact house. The dog you have been praising for being independent and calm and easy. I am not telling you that dog is definitely suffering. Some dogs genuinely are resilient and find solo time unstressful. But I am telling you that silence and stillness are not reliable indicators of well-being. They are indicators of observable behavior. And the research on learned helplessness, on HPA axis dysregulation, on the owner-dog cortisol synchrony, tells us that some of the most distressed dogs in the world present as the easiest dogs in the house. Watch your dog when you leave. If you have never set up a camera during an absence, do it once. Not because you need to solve a problem, but because you deserve to know what actually happens when the door closes. Because that dog is trusting you to notice, and they do not have any other way to ask you to look. If this changed how you see what happens in your house while you are at work, hit subscribe and leave a comment below telling me whether your dog is the loud type or the quiet type when you leave. I read every single one, and the next video is going to explain something that happens in most homes every single day that nobody questions. Your dog takes your oldest, most worn-out clothing and drags it to their bed. You have always assumed it was about warmth or habit. But a 2015 brain scanning study from Emory University found something in that behavior that is going to completely change how you understand your dog's relationship with your scent. See you there.